friends. I'm Karen, and this is the Family Food for Moms podcast. We're talking about inspiration for family cooking and dining. Lately, we've been thinking about the best ways to help our health. We've had a little bit of eczema, some of us. Other less obvious symptoms, which I can't even think of right now. But I was looking at Instagram at a reel about what's the healthiest food in the world, on the planet. And he said it was breast milk, human breast milk for people, obviously when they're babies. And then the things that mirror that the most in terms of their benefits and nutrients, etc., are fermented foods. So we've always had yogurt, sometimes raw yogurt. We have raw milk, and we love aged cheese. And we also get lacto-fermented pickles and sauerkraut at the health food store. But I wanted to look into making them cheaper, and just finally getting over my fear of making them. I think my fear of making these things comes from worrying about the bad bacteria. We've also done sourdough bread, obviously, like most people during COVID and before that. But it was never something that seemed in danger because you cook it. Whereas fermented foods, they're on the counter for 3 days. Any bacteria, well, they have a lid on, but could get in. So it just felt a little harder, a little more dangerous and scary. But I decided to finally take the plunge. Kelly, if you're listening, you inspired me. You've done this a lot. A couple of my friends do this, and so it felt like it was time. So what we started with was the pickles. They seemed very easy. We got some baby cucumbers. We sterilized a jar in the dishwasher, although we do use healthy soap, not the normal dishwasher soap. And then should I say natural soap? I don't know what healthy means in that context. So I got dried dill. I couldn't find fresh dill. Got some mustard seeds. And then we basically put the pickles in the jar, made a salt water brine of about, I think it was 2 or 3 tablespoons of salt. We used Himalayan salt in some water, some filtered water. We mixed that up and poured it over the pickles. And then in fact, I think I added the spices and herbs to the jar before. And then poured that over, leaving about an inch at the top and covering it tightly, putting it on the counter. I didn't have any kind of starter. You don't necessarily need one, but I did add a few pieces of sauerkraut that we already had in the fridge. It felt like they would help get the fermentation process going, and Google confirmed that. So we had that jar sitting on the counter for 3 days. I opened it once a day to just let out any excess gas, but there didn't seem to be any. Any of these things may not be the correct way. So if you know, please let me know. I think I read somewhere that I needed to do that rather than have a loose lid on top. So my email is karen@familyfoodformoms.com. I'd love to hear from you. So the pickles seemed to do well. There was a little bit of bubbles and fizziness towards the end. And now it's in the fridge, and then we're going to taste those. I'll let you know how they do. I will eventually try sauerkraut as well. That's a bit more labor intensive with grating the cabbage. Then we are going to try milk kefir. At this point, I'm still buying milk kefir from a health food store. But it's pretty easy. I've ordered the kefir grains. You basically put the grains in milk and then leave them to ferment. I'm not sure yet if you have to heat the milk. I'll have to research that. Then we've tried yogurt making for the first time. I ordered a little yogurt maker. It makes a liter at a time in little glass jars, and it basically keeps it at the temperature of about 100 degrees for 36 hours, 40 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, more or less. And that's been so easy. You basically either use milk and cream or just milk. I like to use the raw milk, and you heat it, and then you add your culture, etc. So it's really easy, and it's really, really, really beneficial. We're doing the El Raturi. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. yogurt. And with that, we found some of the bacteria capsules. So you use the capsules with the bacteria as your starter. And then you also add some sort of prebiotic powder, prebiotic fiber, which you will get in any kind of yogurt making kit. So you're going to add your prebiotic, you add your bacteria, you basically open the capsules and tip in the contents of a couple of those, depending on how much you're making. I think it was 2 capsules per 1 liter of milk/cream. And then you mix it up well, and then you put it into the yogurt jars, which have also been sterilized. And then you turn it on and you leave it for 36 hours. And then you put it in the fridge for a few hours to finish fermenting and kind of come to a nice texture and thickness. So we're going to taste that as well. I have mixed one up and looked at it. I haven't tasted it yet. It smells a little bit like cottage cheese. I know this is a very strong yogurt. By the way, I know you can use about 1/3 of a cup of the yogurt to make your next batch. And then you can do that 3 or 4 times before you should use new bacteria from the capsule again. So what I plan to do the first time, because we're not all that good with sour foods, is to make a smoothie using the yogurt and berries and honey. I know that cottage cheese works well in this context, so I'm sure the yogurt will taste great. Adding some frozen blueberries or frozen raspberries and some honey. And then we'll taste that and see how it turns out. We could also put it in the context of some other yogurt that isn't as strong, mix them together and add a bit of honey and muesli or granola. So we're going to try that out and see how it works. One of the challenges is that I want to use raw milk and I only order that once a week. So it's harder to make enough yogurt, but I possibly will experiment with frozen yogurt, frozen milk, and see once I've defrosted it if the yogurt works just as effectively. That'll be great because then I can make it a few times a week instead of just once. So what you do is you mix up the milk and the cream, and then you need a thermometer of some kind, and it has to heat. I think it's about 85 Celsius and 180 Fahrenheit, more or less. The instructions are always with your yogurt starter kit. And then you let it cool, and then you add the prebiotic and then the probiotic, mix them up and put them in the jars. And then you leave it for 36 hours on that temperature of 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about 40 degrees Celsius. And then you just take the jars and put them in the fridge, and then you mix them up and then see how they're looking. You may want to drain the whey a little bit with a cheesecloth if they're too thin, or you can use it as drinking yogurt, add some flavor or blend it up with some strawberries and honey, like I mentioned, or other berries. So it's really easy to make, and the whey is really good too and really high in probiotics. You can use that, keep it, and use it in smoothies, etc. So I'm really excited about this yogurt, especially because it's supposed to be very, very high in probiotics, the ratiuri probiotic, the lactobacillus ratiuri, that we don't have in our guts. It's a rare one that we often are missing these days because of antibiotics, because of cesarean births, because of all kinds of things that have basically made it die out. So using this particular strain makes stronger yogurt than usual, but very, very good for the gut. So we're excited to see if we can cope with it. We're going to start slowly with eating it so that it's not a huge shock to the system and build it up. And then trying the other things is like the homemade pickles and the kefir. I'll update you on how that's going. Also, we've been making bone broth twice a week, having a lamb roast, leg roast, and chicken roasts, and then making broth immediately after taking those out of the crock pot. We just put the bones with a little meat and cartilage back in the crock pot, and then we add the usual, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, like 1 or 2 cupfuls, to help draw the nutrients out of the bones, and then a bit of salt, bay leaves, carrot, onion, maybe celery. A tomato works well. And then water. Top it up with water, and we leave it for about 24 hours. And that makes great bone broth. We don't put it in jars. That's too much fuss. We put it in a big glass container with a lid in the fridge, a plastic flat container. And we just use a ladle to scoop out what we need. And then I make soup with it a few times a week. We make cauliflower soup, cauliflower and cheese soup, broccoli and potato soup, butternut and sweet potato soup. And all of those are very simple. I think I've mentioned before, it's basically bone broth, water, vegetables, salt, pepper if you like. Then blend it up with cream or coconut cream or cheese and cream or nothing at all, just the water. Blend it up, and that's a delicious appetizer or side for a meal. We find it's much healthier and easier than having vegetables every meal. So instead of a stir-fry vegetable, which is not bad, we'll just have a course with the soup before. And the body digests it so well. The bone broth is so good for the gut, and the vegetables are soft and well cooked, so they're very healthy. And I really find this one of the healthiest vegetable parts of a meal. So adding these to our general cooking has been quite a challenge to get into. It does feel like a bit of extra work, but it's quickly settling down into not too much extra work. And I really want it to become part of our routine. And then the other part is to actually use the stuff regularly. We always forget that we have sauerkraut in the fridge. The kids don't let me forget about the pickles, but we forget sometimes about the kefir, etc. So I want to figure out a routine where we have those regularly and are able to eat them. So I'll update you again soon about how it's all going and on those particular fermented foods and how they taste, what we've used them in. But I hope you're inspired. I've been inspired to try making them from scratch, and so far it's going great. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.